Welcome to Replenish Your Life, a space to discover how to embody your purpose, strengthen your intuition, and manifest who you truly are. I'm Morgan.
And I'm Lucy.
And we hope you're ready to embrace your divine design and replenish your life.
In today's episode, we're chatting to Cerries Mooney. Cerries is an archetypal life and business mentor and is known for creating the free primary archetype test at cerriesmooney.com. Her work is about guiding you back to the truth of who you really are and infusing that truth into the way you live, love, and serve. Hi, Cerries. Thank you so much for being here with us. It is such an honor to welcome you to this podcast. So first of all, just tell us a bit about yourself and what you're working on right now.
Oh my goodness. Well, firstly, thank you guys so much for having me. I'm just so honored that you invited me, and there's so many juicy things to to dive into. So a little bit about me. I'm Cerries, and I live in the UK with my husband and my daughter and our 3 dogs and 3 cats. And 2 gerbils and a hamster. We've got like so I have been working for myself for the last, since 2014. Since 2013, actually, I gave up my job in 2012 because I wanted to get more out of life, and I was in a soul-sucking job that I didn't enjoy. And so I've been on this journey for the last few years, really, really getting to know myself and really aligning the way that I'm moving in the world with who I really am. So my work is based around archetypes, which I know we're going to dive really deep into in this podcast. But I adore archetypes. I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I'm someone who is so passionate about the way they've helped me in my life. My work is all about passing that on to other people. And at the moment, I recently launched my latest work, body of work, Your Life Signature. So at the moment, I'm just kind of working on helping people dive into their signatures. And it's a very kind of new and exciting phase of my work. It's all unfolding, so it's right kind of at the beginning stages. So super exciting.
Amazing. Yeah, that's brilliant.
Yes, and thank you. And you mentioned, so you just briefly mentioned archetypes. So I actually first discovered you through your work, your primary archetypes quiz.
Yeah.
And I think it was through Pinterest, but it was like fascinating, and the graphics were beautiful, and the information, it was just like stunning. And so, what led you to explore archetypes?
Really interesting question. So firstly, I've always been fascinated with archetypes. I can't actually remember when I first heard of archetypes. It's bizarre. It's like they've always just kind of been there in my life, which is really strange. But over the years, I've read more and more about them, and I've been fascinated by Carl Jung's work on archetypes. But really, I think my own journey with the archetypes, that's kind of been the motivation for me to keep learning more and more and experiencing them. So yeah, funny story. The reason I actually got into doing this work in a more intentional way was when I left my job back in 2012. I started to run my own business as a brand identity designer. So that was always my background. So before I ended up in this job, I was working in branding. So branding has always been an interest of mine. And if you ask me what I do as a skill, it would be graphic design, brand identity design. What I quickly realized as I was working with clients was that I would ask them, obviously, as a designer, who are you? And more often than not, the answer came back, I don't know. And it really became apparent to me that it's very, very difficult to define who we are and to get that sense of purpose in today's modern world, especially. And so I realized that my interest in archetypes could actually really help my clients get a feel for who they were, so that I could then design a brand identity to fit them. So it's essentially at the beginning of my work, it was primarily for branding, but then it's just developed into something so much more than that. But yeah, that was kind of how I started taking the archetypes a lot more seriously, was to help my clients understand themselves on a deeper level so that I could understand them and then create a brand for them. So yeah, but it's definitely been on a journey since then. That seems like a million years ago.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine. And that's it's such a brilliant way of articulating it, because, wow. I mean, I can definitely relate to that feeling of somebody asking me, certainly for a branding conversation or, anything like that. Well, who are you? And having that sense of confusion and just being like, well, actually, I don't know. So that's why this work, I feel, is so, so helpful and so necessary. So Cerries, just from your point of view, for someone who's new to this kind of work, what is a primary archetype?
That's a great question. So, okay, archetypes. The first thing to know about archetypes is that people tend to interpret them differently.
Mm-hmm.
For me, that is one of the awesome things about archetypes. So if we look at the way that Carl Jung refers to them, he refers to them or explains them as patterns of instinctual behavior. And I think I've actually got a quote here from him that says that archetypes are forms or images of a collective nature which occur practically all over the earth as constituents of myths and at the same time as individual products of unconscious origin. So to break that down, what that actually means is that we, as human beings, we almost have these kind of kind of visual patterns, emotions, thought patterns that are instinctive within us. This isn't something that, we're born with them, but they are something that's found in every human being.
Right.
So to give you a quick example of that, if you think of the word mother, you instinctively, most people would instinctively pick up on the nurturer archetype.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's almost like it's come like these kind of images, patterns of images that originate in your subconscious and the subconscious of all human beings. That's the great thing about them. It's a collective thing.
Right.
Some people interpret their archetypes as energetic forces. Some people kind of talk to them in their minds, almost like an angel or a guardian or something like that. For me personally, I don't see them as anything like that. For me, this is just being aware of patterns within me, usually thought patterns, and just those instinctive gut knowing patterns. So there are 12 archetypes, Jungian archetypes particularly, although an archetype, as I say, is purely a pattern. So we are always creating new archetypes all the time.
Right.
But essentially, the 12 Jungian archetypes are the ones that I choose to work with. So yeah, it's very difficult, I think, to explain the concept of an archetype when they're so nebulous, I think is the right word. It's very difficult to put down. But essentially, that's what they are. They are those images and patterns in your mind that we all share together collectively.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating. And so, okay, this is just like a two-parter question. So, what is your primary archetype, and how has knowing that influenced you?
Oh, okay. So, the thing about the primary archetype is I personally believe that we all resonate more strongly with one or two archetypes. So something else to clarify right at the beginning is that we all have all 12 of these archetypes within us at all times. So when we talk about the primary archetype, that's not to say that the other archetypes are not relevant in our lives. It's just that we tend to resonate more strongly with one or two.
Mm.
And the second one, and we'll get to this later, is your life signature. That's your archetypal blend from my perspective.
Yeah.
So the primary archetype is the archetype that the way that I like to describe it is there is this narrative that runs through your life story.
Mm.
And that narrative is very closely linked to who you are at a very, very deep level. And that narrative, that primary narrative, is your primary archetype. So my primary archetype is the Alchemist.
Mm.
And what's your primary archetypes? Remind me of what yours are.
Mine's Morgan. Mine's the explorer.
Okay.
Yeah.
And mine is the innocent.
Yeah.
Yes, I remember us having a discussion about how your
Yes.
primary archetypes play off each other. So you both have completely different viewpoints and perspectives of how you're navigating the world. So obviously, Morgan, you're more of the explorer, and Lucy, you are the innocent. So it's that way that you primarily experience the world, that it's almost like a lens that you view the world through. So knowing my primary archetype, oh my goodness, I don't even know where to begin in how much it changed my life. I think as an alchemist, knowing that I have the ability to affect transformation is the big thing for the alchemist. So alchemists are those who are catalysts for change. So before, kind of pre-alchemist awareness, I didn't believe that I could affect change.
Right.
And as such, even though I knew at a very deep level that I could, without that validation, and I think that is the key with archetypes, they are extremely validating. Once I realized that I was an alchemist, I was like, actually, this is what I was born to do. It's like you have these gut feelings that almost feel taboo in many people, like with the archetypes. It's like it's a part of me that I have to hide away.
Yeah.
But really, with that awareness, it just, for me personally, it's just made me feel like I can really, I can actually contribute to the world in a very specific way. But there are so many ways that my primary has changed my life, even down to my marriage.
Oh, wow.
My parenting style, really interesting. So my husband is a nurturer, and I'm an alchemist. So if you look at our marriage, he's a more natural parent than I am, and he's a more natural caregiver. I'm more of the one that's more driven. I'm obviously running my own business. He's not interested in any of that. He's like a rock. And so it's just interesting that knowing my alchemist and knowing that he's a nurturer really gives us a sense of who we are in our marriage and our parenting roles. And it's again, before I kind of connected with my alchemist, I always felt terrible that I wasn't more of a nurturing mother. Don't get me wrong, I'm a very, very nurturing, very, very nurturing. But my style of nurturing is kind of alchemist in nature, whereas my husband, he's kind of like more of the bare bones stuff. So he's the one that's doing the cooking, the cleaning. He's the one that gets the uniform ready in the morning. I'm the one that is kind of really inspiring and encouraging my daughter to really dig deep into life. And she's only 9, so I've got to take it easy. So just having that archetypal awareness in marriage, home life, even down to finances. It's like there are so many, there's no limit to the amount of things that you can apply your primary through. And of course, my business is definitely the way that I work, the way that I earn a living is probably the most significant. It's probably the most significant area that my archetype has influenced. I'm really kind of taking that choice to work for myself and to do work that changes people's lives, which I wasn't getting in my previous job. And that's why I think I was so kind of emotionally starved, if you like. Yeah, does that answer the question?
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Yeah. And you said something that I really want to pick up on that really resonated with me. It kind of got me right in the heart because, Keris, I have to be honest with you, when I first discovered my primary archetype as the innocent, first of all, there was a deep resonance with that, but it was on a soul level. And I actually thought, well, yes, that is me, but it's a part of me that I keep very safe and very protected. I don't
Mhm.
like to share that part of me with the world. And so I had some resistance to it. And I almost felt like, well, I can put on a mask and be something else. I don't want anyone else to know that that's actually who I am. So, which is probably part of the innocent anyway, right?
It is.
So
Absolutely. Yeah. I was just about to say like that. And one of the things that I encourage people to do
yeah.
is to really think about their reaction to their primary archetype
Yeah.
through the eyes of the archetype. So the innocent is one of the key motivating factors of the innocent archetype is safety.
Mm,
And so innocents are kind of their default response is to keep things safe.
yeah.
Um, and so even the way that you reacted, it's funny because I always kind of smile that when a revolutionary really pushes back on their archetype, I'm like, it's right there. So even the way that you see the archetype is so telling. So it
Yeah.
doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, so there was so much there that I was like, the way that I visualized it was, well, that's my inner child. That's my
Hmm.
inner child who's very precious. And so, here the question that I actually want to ask is, how what are some ways to overcome resistance to your primary archetype?
Oh, that's a really good question. So one thing I will say is that over the years that I've been doing this work, since I launched the primary archetype test back in 2014,
Mm-hmm.
I have seen a lot of resistance.
Mm,
One of the things that I've noticed though is if you allow it to sit, usually people come round and like, oh, now I get it. And I
mm,
think the key with archetypes is it's something that unfolds. It's
right.
a journey. I say on my website, this is not a personality quiz.
Yeah.
Um, because this is not about giving you another box to fit yourself into. This
Mm,
is about an invitation. It's an invitation to self-inquiry on a very, very deep level. And
right.
so in order to get to that, there are so many layers and levels of conditioning that we have to kind of dig through. If you have that resistance at first, my usual advice is to sit with it. Sit
Mm-hmm.
with it for as long as you can. Like, if you can sit with it for 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 12 weeks, whatever, and just really kind of observe. That's the second one. So time and observing. So give yourself the time to really reflect on that results that you got for the primary, and then observe and observe. 9 times out of 10 people will come back and say, do you know what, it was so close I hadn't even noticed it. That's usually how people feel.
Mm.
So yeah, I think that's the two things. It's really being open-minded to observe, and sometimes I think the response that people have to the archetype, especially if it's more of a kind of denial type response,
Mm.
it's because it's so real they can't handle it.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
It's
like,
so true.
yeah, and I think the way that humanity is right now, there are so many smoke and mirrors and people trying to persuade us to be people that we're not. And so when you actually hit the truth, it's like it feels uncomfortable,
Yeah.
we're not used to it. And so so often I get people saying, this is not me. And then, kind of give it a week or two and it's kind of started to seep in and it's like, oh, maybe this is me after all. And then it's floods of tears of validation. Then like, this was me all along, but I was trying to deny it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the two things, is time and observation.
And just to share that when I when I got the Explorer as the primary archetype, I thought, can I actually be that bold? Like, it sounds fun to be an explorer. Am I actually an explorer? Like, there was, I don't know if that's part of it. There was there was self-doubt there. And but over time I've like really, like, I love that. I love the idea of it, and I love being an explorer, and I can see that in different areas of my life. I guess it was almost allowed me to give myself permission,
Yeah.
a little more permission to be that, or to step into that. So that was beautiful.
Well, here's the other thing as well about certain archetypes more so than others, but certain archetypes come with a lot of stereotyping. Stereotyping can often have real consequences, I think, for whether or not you choose to live it out, even though it is your truth. So the Explorer is a great example of this. So the Explorer quite often gets labeled as being flaky or non-committal, or like a butterfly, you know, where you're constantly going from one thing to another.
Yeah.
And so quite often when I work with explorers, the kind of the situation they found themselves in time and time and time again is they've been told it's not okay to be an explorer. An explorer means you're non-committal. And so explorers tend to hide that part of themselves away and wonder why they feel unfulfilled in life. It's like, there are four kind of motivational, four key motivators for each of the archetypes. And there are three archetypes that live within each of the four motivational areas. So the motivational area for the explorer, and actually for the innocent, which is really interesting for you two together, motivation is independence and fulfillment. So if you are trying, on the opposite end of that scale is belonging. So quite often when people put their demands on an explorer, you know, and kind of demand that they be part of the community, and the explorer just kind of wants to do their own thing, it creates tension. And so of course explorers don't want to rock the boat, even though they want to follow their own path, but they don't know anybody. So again, you know, the resistance sometimes that we have to our truth, especially the archetypal truth, is that we know it's going against the grain, what others expect from us, whether that's society in general or more specifically the people that are around you.
Yeah, I relate to all of that.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And okay, so you mentioned your life signature earlier.
Yeah.
And okay, so how does that build onto the primary archetypes?
Okay, so for the last few years, I have been, so obviously there are many ways that you can work with archetypes. You can work with all 12 of them, you can make up your own. There are so many different ways that you can work with them. But the way that I recommend people work with them is to identify the two archetypes that you most strongly resonate with, and that's your primary and your secondary. The remaining 10, it's not that they're not there, but if you can imagine almost like a council. So you have the two people at the top chairing a meeting, and then you have the other 10 in like supporting roles. That's the kind of vision I have when I talk about a primary and a secondary archetype, which together I refer to as the blend of those two archetypes that you most resonate with, and then you've got the 10 supporting ones underneath that. So your life signature is my latest body of work that brings the secondary in to support the primary. So with me, for example, I am an alchemist, but I know that the alchemist is only half of my story. The other half of my story is the sage, and that is my secondary archetype. So your life signature is essentially those two archetypes together and what they mean for you personally. And it's so interesting because once you add that secondary in, it's like a whole new level of insight opens up.
Right.
It's interesting because if you go beyond two, if you start to focus on all of the archetypes, it gets quite overwhelming.
Yeah.
But if you really focus on those two, it can just be so potent, I think is the word. To really understand yourself on a deeper level.
Yeah.
if you take, for example, if you're an explorer, an innocent explorer is going to be very different to a ruler explorer. It's like, how are you being an explorer?
Mm.
And kind of how those two archetypes play off each other. What I found over and over again, I mean, I've had thousands of people go through my work in its previous iteration. Your Life Signature is like the latest version. It's just such a profound experience to see how those two archetypes interact with each other, because it can teach you so much about the kind of person that you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. And you're right, it's such a potent process. I mean, I've taken the your Life Signature course, and the process, I'm an innocent alchemist, right? So how I'm using the innocence for alchemy and for transformation. And there's something here for me in terms of how I've experienced it, where it's our truth with a capital T, and within that there is great vulnerability and authenticity, and that can feel really scary, right? So
It's terrifying.
yeah, I mean, it is, especially in today's world. So, for people who are listening, or maybe perhaps people who are really fascinated in this work because it's so juicy and deep, why, in your experience, Cerries, why are we so afraid of authenticity and vulnerability? What's going on there?
I've got a really good answer for you for that one. However, something I did just want to mention to you. So the innocent, just to give you an idea of how this works. So the innocent alchemist, the innocent is the alchemist, first of all, is a risk taker.
Yeah.
The innocent, however, is terrified of anything that would make it feel unsafe. So you have, what I just said about there being a tension and there being, and of course it goes the other way. There are ways that there's a lot of synchronicity. So the innocent is very playful. The alchemist loves to take risks. So your playful risk taking is a really good area to be in, but taking the risk too far and making the innocent feel vulnerable, that's when you would start to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So this is kind of an example there of how knowing those two archetypes can really help you understand who you are. So back to the question there about what's actually going on in terms of how terrifying it is. I think so much of this comes down to, this is where we're going to get a bit deep now, I'm afraid.
Awesome. Yay, good.
This is one of the core kind of pieces of your life signature. So you've probably heard of the hero's journey. I'm guessing you both.
Yes.
You will have. So the hero's journey, just for anyone who isn't aware of the hero's journey, it is a kind of archetypal journey through the circle of life. And this is either on a personal level, so in a physical life, like my life, or it's the way that nature works. It is this kind of circle of birth, death, rebirth. When we look at that in terms of the archetypes, we go through a very, very specific journey through the archetypes, and a really good person to look up on this is Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell wrote a lot about this. But there is this kind of 3 very specific stages of life that we go through, both on a macrocosm and a microcosm level. So we have that initial stage where we are setting out on the journey. We felt called to something, and we set out on the journey, and then we kind of, we know there's something more. We know there's something more, but we don't know what it is. And in order to really get to the very depth of our truth, we have to go into the underworld. We have to go into our unconscious or our subconscious. And then once we've kind of dug around in our subconscious for a while, we then bring what we've learned back up into society and give it back in the form of our gifts and what we have to offer the world. The problem is that when we go down into the unconscious, it's a very scary place because we don't know what we're going to find there. And in your life signature, the journey kind of takes you through into your personal unconscious and the collective unconscious, which is where the archetypes play. Like I say, we don't know what we're going to find there. And it's the fear of the unknown. It's the fear of the unknown. And I think so often there is so much resistance there, especially when we're kind of going into realms that we've not been in before. If you don't know what's coming, then that can be a very, very scary prospect, especially, as we've already said, in today's world where everything is always switched on. There isn't this sense of the cycle of going through into the underworld of something. We want everything done for us and done for us yesterday and the most easiest route possible.
That's true.
But we're not great at facing that darkness and that unknown. And quite often what's in the unknown is our most significant challenges. So for me personally, that was depression. I experienced depression since I was 18. But for me, you've heard of the dark night of the soul. It's because we have to face those fears. We have to face those really deep insecurities. And so often all of these insecurities come down to the fear of death. That's essentially what the underworld is all about. But we have to go through that death in order to be reborn. And we have to, really embrace that darkness so that we can step back into the light again. But all of this is terrifying for people because we're not used to it. We're not used to it. And I think that's where the fear comes from.
That's so makes so much sense. That's so true. It's so true. And you're right in the sense that, the way that the world works at the moment, I mean, we don't often actually give ourselves the space to be in that cycle of reflection that comes with this work. There's often a push to, okay, well, get over it, like come through it. What's the lesson learned and get up and move on. And sometimes actually that's not the point.
Exactly. Exactly. We've become a society that is so focused on perfectionism and being at full speed all of the time. And I learned this lesson probably the most strongly in my work. And when I first started to work for myself, I saw a lot of entrepreneurs who were smashing it all of the time. It was like there was no downtime. It was like they were just, really killing it in their own field all of the time. And I realized that my work was not like that. I would go through these seasons of kind of, I would go through a season of being extremely inspired, extremely motivated and creating a lot. And then I would kind of enter this season of quietness and being completely, unproductive.
Right.
Completely uninspired. And when that first happened, my initial response was, there's something wrong with me. Why can't I keep that up? Why am I not creative all of the time? Why am I not motivated or inspired all of the time? But then when you realize that this is actually part of the greater cycle, it's part of that cycle of birth, death, rebirth. And like I said earlier, it's found everywhere. If I look at the tree outside my window right now, there it is right there. This isn't something that is it's not like pie in the sky. It's the way that nature works. But somehow as human beings, when we're so caught in ego and our minds, we seem to completely bypass that. We can't accept that quiet, that death, if you like, that deathly period of quietness, reflection, letting go, and just being okay with the kind of slower pace. We push against that and it causes so much internal conflict. And it's an issue. It's a problem in the world. I really believe that. So yeah, and this is why the archetypes can help you, because you realize then, okay, actually this is supposed to happen.
Yes.
The natural part of the process. We're supposed to slow down so that we can, if you look at the archetypes, I don't really go into this in your life signature, but when the archetypes, the 12 archetypes actually follow the circle of the hero's journey. And when you get down into the kind of bottom part of the circle, and you're in the underworld, the two archetypes there that you're working with are the creator and the revolutionary. the revolutionary is all about death and is all about, you know, kind of culling all of the things that no longer work. And it's a difficult space to be in. You know, you have to ask really tough questions.
Right.
But then once that space has been cleared, the creator comes in and makes more, you know, kind of makes more use of that space by creating things that really mean something to you.
Wow, it's beautiful.
So yeah, it's but you know, so many people, they just want to stay on the top of the circle.
Yeah.
They just, that's it, you know, and there's no space for that true growth to occur, I think.
Yeah, and I feel like eventually, like nothing, you can't just always stay on the top of the circle. Like it has to eventually, there has to be some, you know, the ebb and flow of life and of energy. It's like there will be a point where they'll have to come down, I think. Something, maybe even some people might experience something that, you know, makes them slow
Burnout.
down. Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I found is that if I don't, and like I say, I did not realize this to begin with. I thought I had to be switched on all of the time, until I burned out. And I've written about this over the years, that I had the first year of me working for myself, I was doing really fulfilling work. But at the end of that first year, I was broken completely. I was on my knees. It was Christmas Day, 2013. I had my first year working for myself. I made a lot of money in that first year, like way more than I thought I could. On paper, everything was perfect. I should be the happiest person alive. I was miserable. I was depressed. I was burnt out. I was exhausted. And I realized, you know, this isn't how it's supposed to be. Like, what is the point if I'm with my life feeling like this? And I think, unfortunately, the situation right now is that society expects us and celebrates us when we are in that state of continual creation and, you know, perfection. And I think it takes a lot of guts to step away from that and say, you know, actually, I don't want to live my life like that. In fact, my business has been a 6-figure business up until recently. I actually decided to downsize, which is so unheard of. I think, you know, if you and one look on social media, it's all about more, you know, but go big, go big, go big. But sometimes that's not who we are. And it takes a lot of guts to say, it takes a lot of courage to say, actually, this isn't how I want to live my life. And our archetypes can really help us understand that and navigate that. I don't know if that answered the question. I've forgotten what the question was now.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I mean, well, what I was going to ask you is, you know, what are some of your conscious business approaches and practices? You started mentioning a few things, but yeah, what can, you know, entrepreneurs or business owners do to take better care of themselves and live more in their truth? What
Like I say, I went really into it in my first year. You know, I was working ridiculous hours, and at the end of it, I really had to ask myself, what is it that I'm trying to achieve here? The answer was, I'm trying to achieve a more fulfilled life. I wasn't actually in it for the money, but yet I was acting as if I was, which was just so bizarre. And so I've really, in my business, I've completely changed the way that I look at it. It's not a business. It's that I do work that I find fulfilling, and I trust that I will get adequately compensated for that. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in terms of working for myself, and sometimes I'm hesitant to say business because I think we all have the opportunity to contribute to society and be compensated adequately for that without having to run a business. Like, I think that the concept of contribution and compensation has really interested me over the years. So there are times when I have done something that does not or has not had an immediate compensation. So I've
Right.
done something that, that I haven't been paid for, but yet it's come back to me in ways of other opportunities that I have been paid for.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the more concrete decisions I made in my business to really explore this concept of this kind of, contribution and compensation and trusting that, is that I decided to make my program a pay what you can program.
Mm.
And your life signature right now is pay what you can, so you can pay anything from $1 upwards. And the program that preceded your life signature was the same, and I launched that in 2014. So for the last few years, the way that I've made the majority of my living is through a pay what you can offering. And I remember at the time when I decided to make my offering pay what you can, the response around me was, "You're insane. What are you doing?" Because previously I had been selling that program for $99 quite successfully,
Mm-hmm.
but I was really, really keen and excited to see what would happen if I offered it as a pay what you can.
Mm.
And as I sit here today, I've made just under $170,000 through that pay what you can in
Wow.
the two different kind of iterations. And what's really interesting though is that some people will pay $1 and some people will pay $150. Like the recommended retail price is 97, but some people will come and pay over. Some people also will send me money after they've completed the program because they paid $1, weren't expecting to get much out of it, and then realized that they actually got a lot out of it and
Oh,
paid me more.
amazing. Amazing.
So I think so much of it is about trust, and it's about generosity. And I think there is so much there is just so much out there about what is in it for me. And I think if you flip the switch and really focus on your contribution, again, which your archetypes can really give you guidance on, that it's just amazing what can happen. And it took my own experience for me to realize that. I come from a family that are very much, you work hard and you get paid for the hours that you put in. But generosity goes such a long way, and there's not enough of it, I don't think, in the entrepreneurial space in general.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the biggest lesson that I've learned, I think, is
Gosh,
that
I mean,
contribution compensation balance. Does that make sense?
yeah, it
Yeah.
totally does. Gosh, it is so inspiring hearing you talk about this, Keris. And I can just tell you that I'm just a huge fan. This is making my heart sing. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for your generosity, honestly, in sharing that with us, because I feel like that's a new paradigm way of being in the world. And
It has to.
it really
It has
does.
to. Yeah. I definitely think, again, in terms of how we make money and how we earn a living,
Mm,
it has to, because the
yeah.
consequences of it not are just too dire, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um,
And there's such a beautiful truth there that you shared about, generosity, and also how it ties into value, because what we value and how we assign value is shifting so dramatically. Yeah.
yeah, but I think it's what you realize is when you start to prioritize generosity. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't earn a living. That's not at
Sure.
all what
Sure.
I'm saying. I have bills to pay, and I want a good quality of living.
Right.
But at the same time, I don't want to be someone that I'm not in order to do that. So it's
Mm.
meant having to be creative in how in how I move through the world. And generosity is a big part of that, because it comes back to you. And just another point to make here, when I launched my primary archetype test, that's my opt-in, although I don't really call it an opt-in, but that's like
Mhm.
the first stage of learning more about the work that I've been doing. I had absolutely no expectation for that whatsoever. I thought, if this can help 10 people in the way that it's helped me, then it's done something. 80,000 people.
Oh my goodness.
um,
Wow.
10
but
people,
the
80,000. Yeah.
It's insane, but the really interesting part about that is I've done pretty much zero advertising,
Gosh.
like none. I mean,
Wow.
I've done the odd paid Facebook ad where I didn't really know what I was doing and I pressed the boost button, not really knowing what it was doing. But but what that shows is that if you are generous and you do your best work generously, it's just how it works. People will share it. And that test has been taken that amount of times purely through word of mouth. So do your best work and share it generously. And I know it sounds so cheesy and so cliche, but sometimes simple is best. The good stuff works.
Yeah. And I love that. That simple is best. That really appeals to my innocent archetype as well.
Simplify to amplify. This has been my mantra the entire time. Do your best work, do it to the best of your ability. Trust that the right people will find you. Don't try to be someone that you're not, because you will get caught out. And people can feel it. People can feel when you're not being authentic. To be your authentic self, and really trust in that process, and know that it is a cycle and there's going to be down times. There has to be, to make room for new things. So
that's so beautiful. Thank you, Cerries. Yes. So where can people find you to take this fabulous quiz?
They can take it at cerriesmooney.com. And it is, if you go onto the website, there's a primary architect test link at the top. There's no opt-in necessary. Of course, if people want to stick around and hear my ramblings weekly-ish, you can opt in, but you don't have to actually opt in. You can take the test. If that's as far as you want to go, then that's fine. And then once you take the test, you get the free guide for your archetype, which kind of goes into a bit more depth about your archetype and how it plays out in your life. So that's the best way to start, is to take the test.
Amazing.
Yeah, and can I say, I highly recommend your newsletter. It is amazing. Like every time I read them, I'm like, wow, this is, and one time I replied to you because I was like, this is amazing. And I didn't, and you replied back saying, thank you so much. And I was just so touched that you took the time to write back. I didn't know that you were, like, I replied thinking that it would probably go somewhere into the, universe.
No. The replies all go straight into my inbox. I will say though that sometimes I'm so blessed that I do get a lot of emails, and sometimes I kind of fall behind on replying to people. But I always say at the bottom of the email me back. I will read it. I'm rubbish at responding. But no, it's funny because someone once said to me, back in the day, like when I first started, someone once said to me, yours are the only emails that I open. It's like when an email comes in from you, I open it because I know it's going to touch me in some way. And I really, really took that to heart. So I fiercely guard my reputation for having emails worth opening. And that's what I really strive for. So I don't write very often, but when I do, I try to make sure that, it's something meaningful. So definitely. Yeah, I'm glad that you enjoy my ramblings.
Very much so, very much. They're great. So one last question we'd like to ask you is, what replenishes you?
Journaling. That was very specific, wasn't it? When you said we've got a last question, I'm like holding my breath. What are they going to ask me? Journaling. For me, I have been an avid journaler my entire life. I'm really, I also run a stationery company to help people get into journaling, because it's been it's had such a huge impact on my life. And I would love to see more. And obviously your life signature part of that is journaling prompts. But writing daily, bullet journaling, but also kind of longhand journaling, it's therapy for me. And without it, it's it's how I untangle my bizarre mind on a daily basis. So I couldn't think of anything else for that question. It's got to be journaling.
And do you journal in the morning, or do you journal every night, or just kind of like whenever?
As and when. I typically start my day with, by the way, I probably should have said my family then, shouldn't I, over journaling? It was like, what journaling? Spending time with my family really replenishes me, just to make it abundantly clear. But I start the day with a kind of a quick review of what I've got on, and then I try to write a page. And really, really helpful tip for anyone that's thinking about getting into journaling but can't. I actually write out at the top of my page what's on my mind this morning. Really, really simple question. But it's like, I just kind of go into, this is on my mind, this is on my mind. And sometimes I write two sentences, it's totally fine. Sometimes I just, write a paragraph, whatever comes out. And sometimes I don't even get beyond the question. What's on my mind today? And then later on, I'll go in and put a question mark. And that's totally fine. But I think just having that act of putting pen to paper, I write with a fountain pen. I start my day in that way. I end my day in that way. Just to have a space, because we're so online all of the time. We're so kind of caught up in social media, that I think it's a practice that can really help ground us and brings us back to ourselves again. So yeah, love the journaling.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us. It feels
You're welcome.
like a really wholesome ritual. I agree, like writing by hand feels like a very grounding ritual to do. So I love that. Thank you. That's beautiful.
Sometimes though, I will just clarify, I don't sit there with a candle and incense burning and stuff.
No.
I just literally I just try and make, over the years, I've made it into a habit. And sometimes, really, like, the whole of your life signature came through my journaling practice. That's how I figured that out, that I needed to create it. It was kind of hidden somewhere, and it was through the journaling that you can actually see in my journal the progression of where I wanted to take the work. And it's fascinating now to look back and see how that journey progressed. But I wouldn't have done that without the journaling, because otherwise things just stay stuck in my mind when they don't make it out onto the page. So
Awesome.
Wow, amazing. Well, thank you so much, Cerries, for being a part of this podcast. Thank you for all your time and your wisdom and your vulnerability. And thank you for sharing that with us and with our listeners. We really appreciate you. So thank you for doing the work that you're doing.
Thank you for having me. Honestly, it's my pleasure. Thoroughly enjoyed myself.
If you'd like to learn more about Cerries Mooney, you can go to cerriesmooney.com and follow her on Instagram @Cerries Mooney. For complete episode show notes and all the links mentioned throughout this episode, check out replenishyourlife.buzzsprout.com. For more information on classes, meditations, and community events to help you replenish your life, and to sign up to receive bi-monthly transformational content, check out bit.ly/replenishing life. You can also find us by searching for Replenishing Life Project on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review for the Replenish Your Life podcast. In our next episode, we're talking to empowerment astrologer Carrie Myers-Taylor all about how you can use astrology to heal lifelong wounds, design your life for the future, and manifest true prosperity.